And now, please welcome your MC, CHCI Law Postgraduate Fellow, Karen Suarez.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon. My name is Karen Itzel Suarez Jimenez. I am orgullosamente indígena from the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, and I am the 2023 CHCI Law Postgraduate Fellow. I am delighted to be here with you all today for the Set for the Future Latina Financial Wellness Session. When my family first arrived to the United States from Mexico, we spent many years living in poverty. Financial stability and financial wellness seemed like far-fetched dreams. Being able to navigate the financial sector in a way that leads to growth for my family and others is a dream I am excited to see come to fruition. I am incredibly excited for this panel. On behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank Delta Airlines, Google, JP Morgan Chase, and Synchrony Financial for their generous support of this session. As we head into this next intro, quick shout out to Central America. It is my honor to introduce welcoming remarks from Session Chair, Representative Norma Torres. Representative Torres is a proud Chapina and was first elected to Congress in 2014 and represents California's 35th district in the Inland Empire. She previously served as a state senator, assembly member, and as a mayor and council member in the city of Pomona. Representative Torres serves on the Appropriations Committee and in the Committee on House Administration. Please give a warm welcome to the Congresswoman.
Buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month to all of you. I am pleased to introduce today's discussion where you'll hear from our esteemed panelists about wealth building, home ownership, and much more. It is an exciting time to be a young Latina, let me just tell you. Ours is a strong and diverse and resilient community, and I am amazed at how far we have come. Growing up, I didn't always have a lot of people who look like me in leadership positions. But over time, from my years as a 911 dispatcher, through serving in political office at the local, state, and now in Congress, I have come to see the amazing things that happen when women like us have a seat at the table. Today, Latinas are essential drivers of our regional, state, and national economies. In fact, we are now the second largest group of women in America's workforce. We're 12 million strong, by the way. We've made so much progress, but it hasn't been easy, and still, we have a lot more work to do. Almost half of all Hispanic Americans don't own any financial investments because many of us still face barriers to long-term financial security. Latinas in particular face one of the widest racial, ethnic, and gender wage gaps in the country due to high cost of higher education, and we hold outsized amount of student debt. And a lack of generational wealth is also an issue that we must ensure that we are addressing, whether we're buying a home or financing our business. And as someone who came to this country from Guatemala at a very young age, I understand the challenges immigrant families face, whether you are a first generation or second generation. In Congress, I am fighting to make the dream of home ownership more attainable for all first-time home buyers. I lead a group of members of Congress who are working to break through partisan gridlock to deliver affordable, accessible housing. I am also using my role on the Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees housing to invest in communities like the Inland Empire and across our country. Bringing down the cost of higher education and expanding student aid is also one of my great priorities. My Basic Needs Act ensures that all students, not just those from certain zip codes, can afford to have their basic needs met while in college. And lastly, we have to make sure that entrepreneurs from all backgrounds have the resources they need to start their own business. We're joined today by a group of impressive panelists who will discuss how we can work together to empower young Latinas like yourselves and ensure that they are financially set for the future. I hope that you find today's discussion informative, insightful, and inspiring, as I know that I will. Thank you so much for being here today and for joining this great session.
Thank you, Congresswoman. It is now my pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, Maria Castro Vayner, Head of Business Integration, Community Impact with JP Morgan Chase.
Buenas tardes, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to the CHCI for allowing JP Morgan Chase to sponsor such an important panel. I was just back there with our panelists, and I'm just so impressed and empowered by the amazing Latinas that you guys are about to hear from. I stand before you not just as a representative for JP Morgan Chase, but as a proud Puerto Riqueña from Brooklyn, New York, who put herself through college, by the way, while working full-time with a degree in finance. But one thing I need to kind of share with all of you is despite having 2 degrees in finance, I kind of graduated with my bachelor's degree, not really knowing too much about my personal finances. And, you know, sadly, that's something that is very common in our community. And so this panel is really about financial wellness, particularly with Latinas. And I just wanted to share that because there is no shame in talking about what you don't know. That is the only way that you continue to learn and grow, particularly in something that's so foundational to the prosperity of our community. And so in addition to that, JP Morgan Chase, I'm also a proud 11-year employee of the firm. And now I get to work on that issue that I just talked about in a very proximate way. So I'm part of the team that manages the $30 billion commitment to racial equity that we made about 3 years ago. And a cornerstone of that commitment is financial health. And we actually created a job family called community managers, some of which are here in the room today, that really focus on financial literacy, financial health, and financial workshops across the spectrum of consumers, from high school all the way up to our parents, for example. And so I just wanted to share that with you as you think about the great people that are going to come talk to you about financial wellness in general. And just know that you have a partner and an ally in JP Morgan Chase, and people like me leading the way, and so many of us here at our JP Morgan Chase table helping us kind of meet that broader goal. So thank you so much, and enjoy the panel.
Thank you, Maria. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Cristina Londoño. Cristina is Senior Correspondent for Noticias Telemundo's Washington, D.C. Bureau. She served as the network's correspondent in California from 2018 to 2019 and Miami from 2000 to 2008. Before joining Telemundo, she was an editorial director and producer for CBS Telenoticias and a producer and writer at Univision. Please welcome Cristina Londoño.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to thank CHCI first for hosting this leadership conference and focusing attention on a topic that's very dear to me because it's personal. It's about the tools and opportunities for Latinas so they can achieve their financial goals. This afternoon, I am very honored to invite to the stage a group of very talented Latinas. They are all trailblazers in their field. Let's start off with Evelyn Barahona. She's the Senior Vice President of the Education Fund of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Next, we have Tania Menendez, CEO of Snowball Wealth. Juanita Vélez. She is a Senior Manager of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of Delta Airlines. Andelia Garcet, Senior Vice President, Health and Wellness Client Marketing Leader of Synchrony Financial. They're all rock stars. So before we go on to our conversation, let me tell you that I had the privilege of talking to these women behind the scenes. We had a conference call in preparation of this. And they all have incredibly powerful stories about the challenges they faced on their way to success. But the most remarkable thing that I found in them is the generosity and commitment that they have to inspire, empower, help, and lead other Latinas to success. Apparently, it's pretty lonely at the top. We need our comadres, we need our friends, and that's what they're committed to doing. So we're having lunch, so let's first set the table and see where Latinas are at this moment. Evelyn.
Yes.
Where are we at?
So being at the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, I'm going to highlight in terms of where the Latina ecosystem is in terms of entrepreneurship. For those that might not know, the Latino-owned businesses represent about 5 million entrepreneurs. Of that 5 million, Latinos are 2 million, and they are amazing. We literally have 6 times the rate of growing businesses than any other entrepreneur cohort. And it's phenomenal to see doing this work. And through our initiative, I've had a chance to meet a few of them, and we're really kicking butt. So I'll leave it at that, and then we'll circle back and let my other colleagues connect, if that's okay, unless you have an additional question.
No, I'm going right away to Delia, because right as we came up to the stage, she confessed something to me about her family that I think reveals where we were coming from and one of the challenges that we face. Growing up, what was in your refrigerator?
So my parents' savings plan, as I was growing up, which I thought was such a great idea that nobody knew about, it wasn't putting money under the bed. It was actually wrapping money in aluminum foil and putting it in the freezer. So that was, at that time, it was the thought of look, there was a lack of confidence in putting money in banks. You really didn't understand about being able to earn money as you were investing that money. So for the longest time, I thought that was my family's private secret. I don't know if anybody else, raise of hands, had a family that put money in the freezer. Thank you. It was not, like I said, it was not my, so at one point I said, hey, robbers know about this, is what I learned afterwards. So they probably were trying to figure out between the steak or the money stack, which ones they were going to take. But that is, we've come a long way from that perspective to having to learn and educate people in regards to how money can make money, and it just doesn't need to be sitting there and not being invested.
But it's definitely still a challenge. Let me reveal something about Juanita. She's also a mindfulness and meditation coach. And one of the things that we're trying to change, that we need to encounter, that we're encountering, is Latinas don't come from families that talk a lot about money. Sometimes we feel bad about trying to set up financial wellness, making money. What have you seen?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a Latina immigrant. I'm also a single mom of a 2-year-old daughter who is 100% Latina. So for me, financial wellness is super important. And having entered corporate America about 12 years ago, I didn't have a tío or a tía that worked at Coca-Cola Corporation or Home Depot. And so I had to navigate a lot of these benefits that companies have and employers provide. I also think it's the responsibility of employers to be more transparent about what is available for us Latinas to take advantage of when you're working for a corporation. And I'm proud to know that Delta is putting that as a priority and an investment in our 12% of Latinos that work at Delta, through emergency savings programs, through Operation Hope, which really focuses on ensuring that we're having that conversation, that financial literacy is available and accessible for our Latino employees. And that's a part of our culture, right? If we're open about talking about finance, then that means we have access to understanding. We can ask questions. And it's that's the important and that's the key driver in really having that conversation is, can I ask a question without it being taboo, right? And so
now I'm going to Tanya. She's one of the Forbes magazine most powerful 30 under 30. She's a serial entrepreneur. She's a CEO of her own company, very young. And one of the things that you're focusing on is education, but educating companies and institutions. Because your target, what you're saying is companies and institutions need to learn how to empower Latinas. All of us up here agree that this country is not going to succeed if Latinas don't succeed. So tell us about what you do and what you found, Tanya.
Yeah, and thank you for setting the stage. I'm so excited to be here. And a lot of thoughts came up as we were making all of these introductions, but to answer your first question, my company provides financial education to companies and financial institutions. We're launching a new product that partners with local banks to provide financial education to local communities and schools. And really what we do also in this is we provide community and wellness as a part of that, because we know that it's not always like understanding how to set a budget. It's also understanding the scarcity mindset and moving into abundance mindset, overcoming money trauma. You know, a lot of us come from backgrounds where money trauma is real, and you know, some people had to be the first in their family to go to college. That's scary. We all say it like it was like, okay, it was a lot to figure out at a really young age. And today, when I think about Latina financial wellness, I think about the pay gap, which is one of the more immediate ways that we can empower Latinas. And then I also think about the wealth gap, which today is 32 cents for every dollar that a white man has. And the wealth gap I see as a long-term strategy to empower future generations. But in my community, this is the last thing I'll say, is in my community, I get so inspired by the Latinas that are a part of it. They are ambitious, they are excited to learn. You know, it's not a pipeline problem at all. There are a lot of really, really talented, smart women that are excited to learn how to invest. We just have to give them the tools and the resources to empower them to do so.
So should companies, and whichever one of you wants to take this, should companies have a program that educates Latinas when they're coming into the workforce? I was the first in my family not to go to college, but to go to college in the US. I came here at 17. My father stayed back in Colombia, from Manizales, Colombia. Never heard of a 401k, never heard of any benefits. And I was not told how that worked. I figured it out as time passed.
So I'll take that. Similar situation to you. When I first started a few years back, and you get offered 401k plan, it was something that I was like, I'm not making that much money. Should I be putting money in a 401k plan? And I take that now to, I joined Synchrony Financial earlier this year, and coming in and having them say, look, if you don't start investing in your 401k, we're going to start putting money for you regardless. So it's really in providing you the education and the resources to be able to do that, right? And providing training. So we are a financial institution, so it's important from our hourly entry-level organization to senior leaders. We want them to be successful, not only in their careers, but be able to finish their career feeling that they're financially secure. And you were talking about the pay gap. That's one thing that Synchrony has committed $5 million to closing that pay gap in their organization. So yes. I think that's where corporations do have to play a role, not only with their employees, but also externally. And I'm very proud to be a member of our Hispanic network, which I know we have a few members of Synchrony here today. But we're not only using the Hispanic network internally to educate, promote, engage, but we're also working externally to be able to identify talent. And I see what we're talking about, we're doing great, but especially when I start to look at C-suite, I think we women, especially Hispanic women, have an opportunity. We see a gap overall in Hispanics. We're about 19% of the population, and only 4% of Hispanics are being recognized as being CEOs of top 100, top 500 companies. So that's where I'm also excited to be part of the Latin Executive Alliance, which is what we're doing is helping to identify talent, provide them the tools and the visibility and the network. Because a lot of what we need to do to manage our careers and learn about things is create a network to be able to do that. So I'm excited to do that.
So let me embarrass myself. I've been in Spanish TV for 30 years. I have access to all this information, supposedly. I started a small business, and I'm totally clueless. I have no idea what's out there for Latinas. So my first question, Evelyn, to you is, how are we failing to get the message out there? What can Spanish media do to contribute? And why does the Latina who wants to start her own business feel alone and like she has to do it by herself?
No, and that's a great question, and thank you for asking that. I think the one thing I will say is that the media, especially Spanish-speaking media, can definitely collaborate with nonprofit organizations, specifically local Hispanic chambers, that I think are an untapped resource to get the word out. I mean, their whole mission is set upon supporting the Latino entrepreneur ecosystem. And I would say even collaborating with corporations, like I believe that every corporation has an incentive to help and support the Latinas because, one, you see it in the numbers. And as my boss, Ramiro, who's our CEO of USHC, he always says, facts don't lie. Like, facts are facts. They're stubborn things. And so looking at that, I think everyone should be collaborating with Spanish-speaking media because there is a huge incentive that if you support a Latina entrepreneur, not only will she add to our growing GDP, which, by the way, numbers came out, we're at 3.2 trillion, where before we were 2.8. Imagine if you have women, Latina women, head of households, impacting not only the business community, but they're the ones that, out of all the cohorts of the entrepreneur ecosystem, they are hiring the most and they provide the best benefits. And this is without like a lot of resources. So to me, when I hear your story, I'm thinking SBA Community Navigator should be your best friend. The USHCC could be your best friend, the local Hispanic chambers, and even CDFIs, the community development like investment. There are like alternatives that support, especially when you're starting, providing you resources. So there's a lot out there, but I think a lot of it is we almost have to connect the dots. And like, we have the hunger, we have the knowledge, so I think we need the coordination. And maybe it starts with this conversation.
Maybe it does. Juanita, I have a question for you. Your title is Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Those positions did not exist when I started in the corporate world. We'd never heard of that. Are they working?
Absolutely. Obviously, I worked for an industry that came to a halt in 2020, as we all experienced. And not only were we able to see that the vast impact of the pandemic in the airline industry, but we were able to see the lack of economic equity that we had across our employees, specifically our frontline hourly earning employees. And so what we did was ensure that we were able to provide that emergency savings that more than 50% of Americans don't have $1,000 available for emergency savings. And when we talk about education, so how do we give access to the type of fundings Latinas can have through entrepreneurship? How do we give access to financial literacy? Delta partnered with Fidelity and Operation Hope to be able to provide these course modules. Once you complete the course modules, you have one-on-one consultations with financial consultants. You actually have access to $1,000 immediately to put into an emergency savings. And that was launched in January post-2020, and 33% of our employees have taken advantage of that. So when you talk about a company that's well over 90,000 employees, 12% are Latino, this is a huge impact. And really, this came about because we added the equity pillar in our diversity and inclusion team at Delta. So we're no longer diversity and inclusion, we are diversity, equity, and inclusion. And economic equity is part of that. Health equity is part of that. Emotional equity is part of that. So really making sure we're thinking through our employers' holistic well-being, because we know that at the end of the day, it's not just the right thing to do, but it's also bringing business results to Delta. Right? And so that was really imperative for us to make sure. It was a complete change that was really driven by Ed Bastian, our CEO, and the CEO of Operation Hope, John Hope Hopkins.
So Tanya, you're in a position where everybody would want to be in. serial entrepreneur. How many businesses have you started so far?
So far, 3, yeah.
Were you nervous? Were you scared? Did you feel supported? What was your mindset that said, oh, we can do this once, not twice, 3 times, and it's going to be great? Because that is not the mindset of every other Latina. Did you have tools that are not available to the rest of the population, or that you want to work on getting available to the rest of Latinas?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about this because it was incredibly, incredibly difficult and isolating, and I don't want to downplay that because I think it's important to say, like, it wasn't all easy and it was just doors were opening. And I do want to actually go back to one of the initial questions that you asked, which was about how corporations can help. And one of the things I want to shout out is Google. You know, I started my career at Google. That was my first corporate internship. And I got that internship because I was a part of a program called MLT that provided interview prep, that introduced me to recruiters, because I didn't have a network where my family members could introduce me to a Google executive and get me an interview. I didn't have family members that I could interview prep with. And so having that external support was extremely helpful. And then, you know, I think 10 years later, they actually provided me a grant. I was a part of the inaugural Google for Startups grant for Latinos. And that was incredibly helpful because that additional $100K was enough to give us enough runway to pivot to go B2B, actually, because we started out consumer. And so these programs work, and you know, that gave us, you know, going B2B gave us the revenue that we needed to keep going. And then I think that that was the first thing, is that the programs, being a part of programs really helped. And I also took this approach to my career around taking risks really early on, because I figured, like, what's the worst that could happen? And I think that approach was helpful. And to be completely honest with you, when I started my career, I was very naive. I didn't realize, like, I remember one networking event, we were funded, my first company was funded by Comcast Ventures, and I was at a networking event with like 50 people. I got there early, so I'm chatting, and then suddenly one of the people that I'm chatting with, he goes, well, so how does it feel like to be the only woman in the room? And then I looked up. Not only was I the only Latina, I was the only woman in the room, and I hadn't even noticed, because that was sort of the blinders that I had on, and it was sort of a moment where I was like, oh man, like, I am the only one in the room, and you know, those types of moments really resonate with you, and they stick with you, right? And so my hope is that that Latinas don't have to be in those rooms again, that there's more people that look like them and that are friendly towards them, and that they don't have to go through that.
What would you say to them?
I would say definitely take advantage of the programs, take risks, ask a lot of questions, invest in yourself, and I think leading with, courage and being able to not be afraid to ask for help, I think, is the biggest thing. Not being afraid to put yourself out there, not being afraid to make mistakes, because if you make mistakes early on, you'll make less later on.
Do you have any advice for Doña Maria, Evelyn, who's a community mom, 3 kids? It's hard for her to take risks because she's got a family behind her. It's easier to stay in her job. Are there opportunities available for our immigrant or newly arrived immigrant population of women?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being an immigrant automatically makes you have an entrepreneurial mindset, like, period. When you work with immigrants, it's like working with an entrepreneur. There is no solution that's not possible. And I think that sometimes we mislabel ourselves and we think, oh, we're an immigrant, we have this and so forth. And actually, to me, that's a superpower, because if you were able to come to a country and bank on yourself, then you should have the ability to bank on yourself again, and maybe do so in partnership, starting with your family, trying to find out who do you have in terms of a support system. If it's not your family, which of your friends? And if it's not your friends, like, you just keep going. And to me, the most powerful being is an immigrant woman. And I've seen this a lot within the Latino community, specifically with women, of how creative, innovative they are in their household, and then they transfer those skills in a business landscape. So I think part of it is maybe you need people hyping you up to remind you who you are, because you can forget when you're sort of looking to like create a new step, you're overthinking. And we spoke about this earlier. Sometimes we could be our own enemy because we're trying to like do everything perfectly, but in the same set of as like an immigrant mindset is just like, just do it and you'll figure it out. And then you could start with resources, right? And I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of programs out there, both like in the SBA and then even like corporate programs. I've found that there are initiatives that are willing to invest in yourself, and if they're willing to invest in yourself, you should double down on your own investment. And it could mean your time. Maybe you do it incrementally. So I think it matters. You mentioned something about risk, and I think as you get older, people become risk averse, but sometimes it's good to take like incremental risks and, you know, and respect your risk level. And other times, I'm older, and I've literally switched careers like 3 or 4 times. And part of it was, you know, I started slowly. I would do my sort of landscape analysis of like why I was interested in moving. And so sometimes people just need a little bit of framework methodology, and the best way to do that is to tap into your network. Tap into people that like you want to learn from, because you'd be surprised. Like when people reach out to me and they're looking for guidance, I'm more than happy to give it. And I think that's how you give back, and that's how you uphold that Maria with the 3 kids who might like be unsure. Maybe all she has to do is be curious and ask questions, and then you might be shocked what you get back when you ask the question.
Maybe she's nervous that nobody's going to pick up the phone. And that was another topic that we talked about, women helping women. How does that have to work, Juanita? How do we set up a network where we see each other as helpers and not competitors?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I've been extremely nervous before coming up here, and I can't say that each one of these individuals didn't give me a hug, a kiss, or a "you got this, mijita," before we got on stage. So we can start there. I think it's important for corporations to start. Listen, we're in a moment of time where it starts at the level of policy. If we're removing DEI from our policy, if we're removing diverse, equity, and inclusion initiatives, then we're not providing access and opportunity for local chambers and U.S. chambers to support the Doña Morias and the businesses that are out there. It doesn't matter what level of, you know, what your title is, giving back to the community should always be priority. And so, because this is what really fuels and funds these programs and provides access and awareness and education that they exist. Earlier, we were talking about bank funding and capital funding, but 1.8% of venture capital funding goes to minority-owned businesses, and less than 1% goes to Latina-owned businesses. And that's because they don't even know that that's an avenue that they can explore to gain.
Repeat that number, because that number is very scary. Here we are all positive, saying that there's a way, and if there's a will, and we can help, and the country is changing, and we have all these programs, but repeat the number you just said.
1.87% of venture capital funds go to marginalized owned businesses, and less than 1% go to Latina-owned businesses. This is mostly due to the homogenous nature of the individuals giving out that funding, but this is also an opportunity and a call to action for corporations, nonprofits, and students at any level to engage in the community and to bring awareness and education about what is available. Is it a bank loan? Is it a small business grant? Is it a program through a corporation that's funding those innovative entrepreneurs?
So let's talk to the magic maker. The banks, the ones giving the loan. My question is, why are Latinas being denied, or why aren't they getting a larger share of the venture capital? They're not applying for it enough, they're applying for it wrong, and they need more help, or they're just not being given to women.
So Christina, I think the core to what we've been talking to is education is an equalizer, and I think that's a piece that we need to make sure that we're giving back and investing and talking to people, because the opportunities are there, right? But how are people preparing to when they go apply for a loan or apply for credit? Do they know what the right information to be able to provide? And I think that's something as we talk specifically about women, we are very good about taking care of our families and focusing on that first. So when it goes about stepping out of that and going to try something new, I'm an introvert by nature, so I know that we tend to be a little bit more hesitant to raise our hands. And that's why I encourage every woman, every Latina here in the room today, that we need to look back and say, how can we help educate? How can we share examples? I think that was part of the earlier question, Christina, that you talked about. How can the media also help? It's like, how do we tell the stories of people that are doing this? The UHCCC does an amazing job also with their organization of helping to grow and identify the different paths of funding. But also the piece that we have to teach people is that a loan is not only the way that you can get funding to get a business. If I look at some of the things Synchrony has been doing, investing both in venture capitals that are Latina, Latino, Black-owned, with $15 million being put towards that, or working with somebody like Aerial Alternatives and putting $100 million for them to help mid-cap businesses, small businesses, diverse businesses to grow. That's what we have to also make sure that people are aware of what those opportunities are. And then how can we help them make sure that their applications, the information that they have, what they need to do is put together in the right way. And that's why I go back to my message of that. It's like, look, as us, education is important. We have to have the curiosity. We have to take the time. And when people don't have the time, we have to create the opportunity to help them build a network that they can be comfortable asking those questions. Because that's one of the things is I think we tend to be shy to be able to say, hey, do I really want to go talk to somebody that I need a loan? Or I'm starting a new business like you're starting, Christine, and being able to say, do I have the time to be able to sit and see what all the options are? So how can we work with organizations that do some of that work, and then we're able to do it?
Because our community knows that if they need to get their papers, their visas, their work permits, they go to an immigration attorney. And they pay thousands of dollars. They work their butts off. And they pay thousands of dollars to an immigration attorney to get everything done right. Who do we go to? What is the name? And a lot of the help is free. We don't have to pay hundreds of thousands or thousands of dollars from our savings. There are organizations that do this for free.
Yeah, there's a few that I can think of, and some of them are very Latino focused and have like a vested interest. Like, the largest one is the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce because we cover national, but I go back to even the local chambers. Some of them are very city, regional, and even if they don't have exactly what you need, they have a resource to connect you, because that's typically how we work. And I would also say there's this organization called Acción that also supports a lot of entrepreneurs. And so I think sometimes we overthink it and we're like, oh, like we need to have like a whole checklist, but sometimes you just have to email and say, hey, listen, I'm looking to start a business. I don't know how. Can you provide me resources? And for example, we have a program at USACC that it's the SBA Navigator program, and it's literally set up so that anyone that's thinking of opening a business within the Latino community, there is a resource set up. And sometimes there are grants provided, and and we have that with different partners because we chose partners that are invested in sort of supporting it. But you have to sort of like almost start telling people. Like sometimes it's part of it's just being like, hey, I'm ready to start a business. I don't know where to start, and you start with your friends, and you'd be surprised how some of them might be more networked. And I would even say that for those that like, I found that. With LinkedIn, my acquaintances have been incredibly resourceful when it comes to questions or even careers or even like investments, that to be really good connectors and not to underestimate the power of your network.
Tanya, is there money available to Latinas that is going to waste or is just sitting there? Are there programs that are just not being used because we don't hear about them enough?
I don't know of any, so if you know of any, let me know. That would be a good problem to have, and then we could tell everyone about it, but not that I know of, actually. The Google for Startups program was the first that was dedicated to Latinas that I knew of, that I applied for, and there were a few other accelerators and things like that I think popped up in the past, but none to the scale of like YC or Techstars, or none of them that gave like that type of exposure and access, and that's honestly what Latinas need, is that type of exposure and access. So how can we not just have like a small corner here, but how can we be integrated into the main stage of like what is the economic power and opportunity of the United States, and that's, I think, where what I think could be helpful. But so I mean, I wish maybe that's a good call to action for the people in this room, is to begin creating those programs, because
I know for a fact there's scholarships that are not being tapped into. Mm-hmm. So Juanita, you worked on a project at Delta, I believe, that was focused on telling more Black and brown stories within the corporation. Does telling our stories, showing up, help?
Absolutely. So I was talking to Darlene earlier. She's, I think, a CHCI fellow, and she was asking for career advice. And I told her, you have to be open and to have a fluid career. So in the spirit of that, I was a marketer prior to being in the DEI space. And during 2020, I launched a campaign series called Amplifying Black and Latinx Stories on Delta's external social channels. So we were telling both customer and employee stories about traveling while Black, or traveling while Afro-Latina, et cetera. And this really led the company to, we kind of held our company accountable by putting it on Delta's social media. Because now, you go to Delta's Instagram and you're seeing all these stories, and then people are asking, well, what is Delta doing internally to support this, right? And so it was really transformative, and I think it's kind of intersecting all of these points, right? Corporations fuel the funding for your local state chambers, for your local small business agencies, and therefore they have that opportunity to create programs like accelerator programs that are available to those small business owners. I sit on the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce board, and I also teach minority and venture capital at Emory University, and they have a fund specifically dedicated for Black, Latinx, and Native American-owned businesses. And every year we have less Latinos applying for the funds, right? Because of that access, the inability to access our community. But it's not because we're not there. It's just because we don't have the people really working to get access to it. So I think the number one opportunity here is, what are you going to hold as your responsibility to be a part of the solution? Because it takes all of us, right? That accountability is at the bottom of Delta's DEI strategy, and it really just takes all of us.
So now I'm going to put all four of you on the spot, because I like to do that. I'm a journalist. That's what we do. Before we go to the audience questions, and I'm going to start with you, Delia. If there was one thing that you could point to, all of you are superstars. I've said it already. Latinas at the top. If you could point to one thing that you did, or access to one benefit that you had, what is it that made the difference?
Look, in my career, what truly made a difference was being part of an employee resource group. And I tell you that because it provided me the opportunity to get role models. It provided me the opportunity to create a network. It also provided me an opportunity to get visibility to education programs. So I had the opportunity to do that, and I've worked now for 3 different businesses, GE, Waters, which was a life science company, and now Synchrony. And like I said, I joined Synchrony early this year, and I jumped in immediately to be part of that Hispanic network, because I see the value that it has for all of us to learn, create that network, and also, again, to get that visibility of people that are doing it. And, spending the time on finding those role models and highlighting those, for me has been like I said earlier, I'm an introvert. It is sort of like, wow, even today, just sitting with this amazing panel, right? I know now who I'm going to be calling about certain things. It's like I'm taking mental notes because that's how we learn from each other. That's the important thing. We need to not be the introverts, not be the shy. We need to be able to educate, create those networks, and be able to elevate each other. And I think that's what we've been trying to do here today.
Evelyn, I'm going to go to you now. What made the difference?
So for me, something that I haven't mentioned during this panel is I started my career in investment management, so it was full corporate, so starting from 18, because I was in a specific program at a university in Boston. And although I had done this program when I graduated, I didn't know my way in the corporate sector. I felt like there were these unwritten rules, and because in my background I never knew anyone who worked in corporate, I was like, I feel like I'm missing something. Then I joined this Latino professional organization, which at the time was called NSHMBA, National Society for Hispanic MBAs, now Prospanica. And all of a sudden, I met professionals, Latinos, superstars that were thriving in different sectors that had no clue, because in my industry, in investment management, not only was like one of the few women, I was like probably the only person of color on my floor. And I, just like you, I had blinders on until my boss mentioned it. He was like, you must feel uncomfortable working here, because I feel uncomfortable and I'm a white man. And I was just like, oh my God, is that what it is? I couldn't name it. I was like, I feel weird all the time and I don't know what it is. But honestly, that was a game changer, because once I realized that there were organizations, I recognized that there were people like me with similar stories, and even if they weren't like me, I was so curious and hungry to learn of what can I learn from them, that it literally set the trajectory of my career in ways that even my company that tried to set me up with a mentor, it just didn't even match.
Juanita?
Yeah, well, in my early career, during my early times in my career, I founded an organization called HYPE, Hispanic Young Professionals and Entrepreneurs, and it was really, it is dedicated to the business and leadership development of 21 to 35-year-old Latinos. Now it sits under the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but really joining that organization forced me, in order for me to build awareness of it, it forced me to become an ally of other communities. And so in Atlanta, I became an ally of the Black community, the Asian American community, the community with disabilities, the veteran community, and really that building bridges off the clock, which is what I used to say. After work, I would go meet and intentionally become an ally so that I could learn about what other communities were experiencing and how we could work together, was what elevated my career. And through that, I was able to get mentors. I have a white man mentor that I always go to when I need to talk about benefits, because I know he and his family have gone through it multiple generations, right? And I think that's important, because I don't have that in my family. And so now I can provide that resource, all of that insight that I get from those mentors that are not Latinos, to my Latino community, right? And I think that's really important for us to come together and become allies.
Tanya?
Yeah, I think I mentioned before some of the programs that I was a part of, which definitely played a big role. And then I forgot to mention how I started my first company was I was working nights and weekends while I was at Goldman Sachs. And when I got my first, it was a leather goods company. And when I got my first order from Nordstrom, that's when I decided to quit after having saved some money. But I think that, so it was a combination of, being a part of corporate America, saving up enough money so that I could go out on my own. And then when I went out on my own, getting funding for my business, when I remember the first day that I raised over $1 million, it was transformational, right? I could hire people. I felt this sense of freedom that I was like, oh, I can finally execute on the ideas that I have. And so funding definitely helps, and funding Latinas. There's so many Latinas across the US that have amazing businesses that I can think of 5 today that have profitable, innovative businesses that could definitely use funding. And so I think that a combination of those things really made a huge impact.
All right, we have 1 minute before we go to the audience questions, so this is a really quick answer from all of you. Delia, how do you fight the fear?
You get up every morning and you go after it.
Evelyn?
I dance with it, and I know it's temporary.
Juanita?
Nobody knows what I know. So, not to sound smart, but I know a lot of things about myself that you don't want to know.
Yeah, I think similar to what people have said, I face it. I think like the best thing to do with fear is face it and move through it.
Because you just said you raised $1 million. I would have been terrified. I don't know if I would have been jumping up and down or I would have crawled under my bed.
I think when it comes to, I think also practicing being comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned something like this similarly earlier, is taking step by step. I think taking it step by step has been a way that I've been able to learn. And then having mentors too, a diverse set of mentors from all different walks of life. You can't just have one. Honestly, you need like 20.
I like that. I like that. We all think of the mentor, and it's 20. Okay. So now we're going to go to audience questions. Anybody who wants to know anything about these wonderful ladies, what you want to talk about? You have mentors up here. I see a hand over here.
It looks like we have a mic making its way to it.
Sí.
Oh, okay. Hello, thank you so much. My name is Consuelo Bonillas. I'm a tenured full professor at King University, New Jersey, but I was born and raised in Arizona.
Come on, Arizona.
So, personal thing I do want to say is, one, thank you so much. And when you mention about what something in your life changed, like your trajectory in a way, unfortunately for me, it was the insurmountable college loans I had to take out for my bachelor's, master's, and PhD. First gen, my parents had no idea. Besides that, I had a father who really didn't want his daughters to go to college, which that's just so upsetting, but that's another thing. But in that way, I actually want to ask you, in your own lives, your partners, were they supportive in your path? Again, I got a divorce because my partner was not supportive of my path to become a college professor and the work that I had to do, especially very few Latinas in the United States are full professors. So partly I did it because it's my dream job, but also represent, So I ask all of you, how did that work out for you, if I could ask that question? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question and sharing. So I'll jump in. I got married a little later in life, and one of my biggest fears was getting married to someone who would be unsupportive because I'm Salvadoran descent, and yeah. And one of the things I witnessed in my family was this high level of machismo and lack of support toward the women. And it actually really scared me. I was scared of getting married because I had that as a model. But then I got matched up through like a traditional friend set me up, and I was very reluctant, not psyched, had low expectations. And the one thing that stood out about my husband was that he came from a long line of strong women. And to me was like ding ding. I'm like, if he could handle his dynamite, sisters and mother, he can certainly keep up with me. And you know what? I'm happy to say that he has. He's very supportive of things that I do and my ambition, and he never makes me feel like being ambitious is a bad word. So, when I read stories and statistics about the biggest decision you can ever make in your life is who you marry, that is true. And I could see that it could make you, or I wouldn't say break you because I don't believe in that. It could make you, just provide you learning opportunities in the long run.
I'll just add to that. I'm also divorced, and this is the first time I've said it publicly, so I feel kind of strange. But I have a 2-year-old daughter, and yes, And we can do it with or without them, right? So the fact that you are a professor from Arizona with all these barriers and challenges that have come through your way, and you made the decision to be bold and courageous and say, I don't want this and I choose that, that should give you enough confidence to keep going.
That's right.
Look, and I'll add, I've divorced, second marriage. What I learned along the way is you need to learn what you can live with, what you can live without. And for me, having a partner who's supportive. My husband has been a CEO of multi-billion-dollar companies and global responsibility. And just before I was coming up and I was looking at my phone, he knew I was here and he goes, go get them, you got this. There is partnership. There is the opportunity of having two successful careers coming together. But we all go on different journeys, and I'll totally emphasize what you just said. I think I ended up with the right person because I knew who I wanted to be, and it was very clear from that perspective. So invest in yourself, be confident in yourself, and the rest will come.
Yeah. So I'm also divorced, so I'm glad this is a financial panel and not a marriage counseling.
Not a marriage counseling.
I don't think we would do good in that. Anybody else have a question? Another hand went up over there.
Mike behind.
Huh?
Hi, I'm Martha Sanchez, Director of Health Policy at Young Invincibles. I'm a first-generation Latina. We work with a lot of first-gen. I know a lot of first-gen are here. But it took a therapist to tell me that I'm not responsible for pulling my entire family and extended family from generational poverty. So what advice do you have for these first-gen Latinas who feel the pressure, feel the weight of wanting to completely change the economic prosperity of their families? How do they balance setting boundaries in order to build wealth and take care of themselves first?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. Yeah, I was sharing on the panel prep call that during the pandemic, 53% of Americans supported their family financially. That jumped to 77% in the Latino community. And it's a part of our culture, right? And I think that what we share with our community is to pour from an overflowing cup. It's not just, you definitely have to put your mask on before putting on others, but I've seen so many instances of Latinas, this is really common, Latinas going into debt trying to support their family when their family members aren't in debt, but they go into debt in order to support their family members and their lifestyles. And I think it's really important to set boundaries and to ask questions and also to educate your family along with you. So as you learn things, begin sharing some of these insights with your family members too. A specific thing that I started to do with my family was during Mother's Day, instead of buying my mom $100 worth of flowers, I set up an investment account and put $100 in ETFs for her as a shared brokerage account. And that way she can see that grow, and I'm continuing to invest through that account during different holidays. And that way, we can teach better habits and buy buildings, not just shoes and clothes and things like that. And I think that setting that example is important.
Anybody else? We have time for one more question. Oh, two over there.
One in the back.
Hi, my name is Rodrigo Salas. I'm the Executive Director of Entrepreneurship for All in Northwest Arkansas. So I deal with our organization, we deal with a lot of women that are immigrant, that came to the U.S. late in their life, that they don't have, a good grasp on English language. They don't understand the system. They don't understand a lot of things that are happening that you kind of have touched on all those things. But I think that I would like to get your your thoughts on how can we help these women, because we face this every day, and how can we help them feel more comfortable in a foreign country with a foreign language and in a system that they don't understand. So we try and we work really hard with other organizations. The Walton Family Foundation has given us a lot of support for that. But at the same time, it's really, hard to empower those women and to make them feel comfortable and to be able to, because they are starting businesses, and they're starting businesses a lot. And they work their backs off, really, really hard. So how would you approach this?
Before I pass this along to Evelyn, let me tell you one thing that I tell all the Hispanic women that I interview. They are the strongest. They are courageous beyond belief. Anybody who's an immigrant later in life picks up their family, risks everything, and comes to this country to start anew, has the strength to start a business. Just remind them of their own power.
That's beautifully said, and thank you for highlighting that, because that is very true, and that's something that even we see with our work and our Hispanic Chamber partners. I would say for especially immigrant entrepreneurs, the fact that they have you as an organization, I think it's key. And I think one of the things that maybe you're seeing is the frustration and sometimes the disillusion of feeling like they don't know so much. And I think that sometimes when we're facing obstacles or big problems, the best way to get at it is break it down in pieces. So maybe it's not about like, we're gonna solve this today, but we're gonna solve this piece right now, or maybe this week, or maybe this month. And I don't know, I'm familiar with, is it E4All that you mentioned? So I'm familiar with it in Massachusetts. I've in fact been in talks with them about ways to like collaborate. I would also say that if there's a coaching mechanism that you have in your program, and if not within your organization, but perhaps maybe with other successful Latina entrepreneurs, maybe it might be helpful to look up to see what's on the horizon as they're dealing with the challenges right now, because it sounds like it's a temporary issue, but it doesn't feel like that for them. So it's that reminding of like, okay, how can I connect you with a network to remind you how amazing you are? Because sometimes those problems could feel like major barriers and you can't go on.
So the clock is blinking, and I'm sorry I have to do this. One phrase from each one of you. Looking to the future, what do you see? What's coming? What can we do?
So I'm going to call on all Latinas and Latinos in the room and say, you can make a difference in somebody's life. And that's how we change the future.
Absolutely. Always look for where you can give back. No matter your title, your age, there's always somebody that could use your extending hand.
I echo all of that, and I'll add for the Latina entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs that you're never going to feel ready. No one's ever going to tell you now is the time to go. You have to make that decision on your own, and sometimes start when you don't feel ready, and things will work out.
I would say that everyone in this room has access to some type of resource, to some type of knowledge, and never think that you cannot activate your connector. I think you should see yourselves as like a walking activated connector of resources. And when you meet folks that are either feeling challenged, never like suppress the urge of trying to connect them to someone that for something that they need, even if you don't know what it is.
And my thought is, no one is coming. No one is going to make your dream come true. There's help out there, but it's very few cases that people just one day discover you or come and give you $1 million so you can put together your business or save for your family. So you got to do it yourself. The resources, like we saw, are there. And I'd like to thank this amazing panel. I told everybody that they were incredible women, and I'm very happy to have shared the stage with them. Delia, Juanita, Tanya, Evelyn, we just became best friends. You can look for us in LinkedIn. I think we all have LinkedIn accounts. They said they would be ready to help and to advise, and I'm sure they will. And thank you so much to everybody. Please keep posting about the conference at CHCIHHM23. Next up, we're going to take a short break, followed by our moment in history, Latinos of the decision-making table. We're going to have a panel discussion featuring all 4 Latino cabinet members sharing their journeys and vision for the Hispanic community. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed this talk as much as we did.
Thank you.